University with master's degree in design. He started his firm named Earthscape Ahmedabad in the year 2013 with his partner, who is a landscape architect. He has been involved with urban planning, urban design, housing, landscape, and he teaches urban design, Faculty of Planning and Circuit. His work has been published in national and international magazines. His office is involved in architectural documentation as well as in urban research. We are very much privileged to have you for this virtual conference, sir. And without
Thank you.
much further ado, the session is over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll share the screen. Let me know if visible. Yes, is it visible, Professor?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So, as Professor introduced me, my name is Narendra. I'm an architect and urban designer from Ahmedabad. Today, as I was briefed about the conference, it is for the Masters of Architecture students, and today's session is all about understanding urban design strategies. So today I'm going to focus on urban morphology, which is a study of looking at cities. I will try to connect how architecture influences urban design and how urban design influences architecture. So today's presentation is to draw a bridge, draw a link between architecture and urban design. My presentation is titled as Tracing the Logic of City Building Through Its Build Form. So through this presentation, we will try to see how can we understand the cities through their buildings. To begin with, these are a couple of slides where I have tried to put some images. All of us, all of you have traveled, must have traveled across India, abroad. You have visited to a lot of places and cities. And you always carry some images with you when you travel to these cities. You carry your memories with you, and you always like and dislike certain cities. You like certain build form, you like certain streets, you always remember certain areas of the places that you visited. And as an urban designer, as an architect, you always wonder that why has this city so different from each other? Why do they have a very specific pattern associated to them? And why do you memorize certain parts of the city, certain streets that you always will remember throughout your life? This raises a question that why do cities have a different form? Why do cities have these different patterns? Are there any specific reasons of the patterns that is associated? So from the vernacular cities of India to the global cities of Europe and US, uh, just a minute. One minute. Give me one.
Sir, you have to share 1 second.
I'm sharing 1 minute. The PowerPoint got
You can mail the PowerPoint, sir, so that we can share.
yes.
Narayan, sir.
Visible now? Yeah, is it
Yes,
visible now?
Yeah. Yes, it is visible,
Okay.
sir. Yeah.
Sorry for the Okay, so from the vernacular cities of India to the global cities of Europe and America, we always see that all these cities have a very different pattern and history and form associated to them. So this raises five questions in my mind that what are the forces that shape the urban form? What can be the shift in these forces that lead to the change in urban form? Because cities are organic, complex organisms which they keep on evolving and transforming. Can the history and evolution of city be decoded from the study of its urban form? Can you look at a building, series of buildings, and guide out and decode that what is the history of this place? Can that history, can a logic be traced from this build form to know why is it the way it is? And lastly, can it be used as a tool to read the city, extract the DNA of the city to understand, analyze it, and probably to conjecture its decode and its growth and development? So to answer to this presentation is an attempt to answer these five questions. Uh, to summarize, we are saying that we are looking at all cities which are different, where each city has a different pattern and an urban form associated to it. Basically, patterns are human resources responses to the land. We come across varying cities on the earth where the cities are a response to the climate, geography, natural resources, or even natural deficits. Cities can be categorized primarily into these three verticals, where one is to look them into physical aspects and say, where are they located? Are they located and built on land, on hills and deserts, on islands? Are we looking at cities which are primarily industrial, religious towns, institutional towns, or the capital towns? Or we are looking at histories from, or we are looking at cities from a historical perspective of they being early town, medieval town, colonial town, or even global towns. To give references for each of these vertical, we are looking at cities of Venice, Shimla, Shibam, Jodhpur, Banaras, and Mumbai. We can look at capital town of Delhi, industrial town of Jamshedpur, or even religious town of Madurai, or look at institutional towns like Vidyanagar in Gujarat. Or you can categorize cities from their historical perspective and say Mohenjo-daro to Bangalore as transformation, evolution of cities. Where whatever city we look at, in any given city, we see a very different varying urban form and urban pattern. And I believe this form and pattern is a resultant of shift. But the shift are in the forces that shape the urban form. And there are primarily 7 forces that shape any city. The first force is the technological development, where the cities have transformed from agriculture to the service-based technological changes. The second parameter, the second shift, is the type of construction. What is the kind of construction that the cities are opting for? So from stone construction to the latest post-tensioning concrete structures. The third and very important shift, or the very important force, is the political organization, from kingdom to colonial to democratic governance. The fourth and again most important is the economy. What kind of economy are we into, and hence can economy also shape our cities? The fifth is definitely transportation, the kind of transportation technology that we are looking into. So from walking horses to the latest metro and metro systems, transportation also shapes the way cities change. The sixth and important parameter is to look at religious culture and society. The seventh, of course, is the policies and the building bylaws that designed by the governing authorities that shape the cities. To understand this further, let us look at how does agriculture, industrial and services change the way our cities are formed. So in any agricultural town, the resultant build form is dependent on the kind of technology that we are into. And whether when we shift into the service-based industry, we also shift from high-rise workspaces to multi-story living and high-density housing environment. Looking at the type of construction, the material shape our cities. The materials shape the buildings, and hence buildings shape the cities. So from the vernacular adobe construction to the latest concrete and steel buildings, our cities are governed by the way we use the material. From the political system, we can definitely see how our cities across the globe have been shaped on the political will. How now this is very important, that how do we identify the shift? When do you realize that something has changed in the 7 parameters that we just discussed? There are different ways of how can we recognize, how can we identify that the shift has happened. One, we look at the grain size, we look at the footprint of the building block. Second, we look at the plot size. Has the plot size changed? Has the building size changed? That means that there is a shift in one of the 7 parameters that we discussed. Has the movement network changed? Has your street patterns changed? Fourth, has the organization of the building blocks changed? Fifth, has the building height changed? Sixth, has the allocation of land uses changed? Seventh, has our open spaces changed? So whenever we want to study our cities, it is not limited to built form. It is also the unbuilt, the open spaces that are very important. To understand the 7 parameters and the shift in the 7 parameters, we will take a case of city of Ahmedabad, where we select 9 examples. We take 9 samples from the city, each one of them based on the evolution. So if you look at starting from number 1, which is the walled city of Ahmedabad, second, extension of the walled city of Ahmedabad, third, development on the eastern side of Ahmedabad. Okay, just to introduce the city of Ahmedabad to you, if you're not familiar, the city is divided basically with the Sabarmati river, dividing the city into eastern Ahmedabad and western Ahmedabad. Western Ahmedabad is the newer development where IIM, CEPT, NID are located. Whereas the eastern Ahmedabad is more to do with the industrial area, the old city, the walled city of Ahmedabad, where the pole houses are located, and now it is the World Heritage Site, where the walled city of Ahmedabad is the first World Heritage Site of India, and where on the northeast side is where the airport is located. So I have selected these 9 samples from the city of Ahmedabad based on their evolution. All of these are 500 by 500 meters square, where this is the oldest one, which is 400 years old precinct of Ahmedabad. This is the Asarva area, which is the industrial era. This is the Wadaj area. This is the new bungalow area in the northeast Ahmedabad. And lastly, this is the newer Prahlad Nagar development, which is the most recent one. If you look at from the satellite image, it clearly says that the building grain sizes, the block sizes here are very small and minute. Where if you look at the Prahlad Nagar, the latest 9th square, where the building sizes are very large and they are high rise. If you look at the shadow, if you look at the street network here, it is a very organic street network, whereas this is a very planned gridiron network. Looking at observing each and every square in a very minute form, you can see that if you try to answer the 7 questions, that what is the kind of technological development when this thing happened. So the walled city of Ahmedabad was based on mercantile economy, and the basic occupation was trading and agriculture. The kind of construction that is used is stone, lime and wood. The kind of political organization at that time, when 1411 the city was founded by Ahmed Shah, the political system is monarchy. The kind of economy that it was in 15th century is mercantile, and the kind of transportation system was walking an animal cart. And the policies and the how do you build a pole house was based on the rules of the kingdom. So that is very clearly seen in the typology. This is a typical walled city pole house, which it's a traditional vernacular housing type, where this is a typical plan of a pole house, which the width of the house is 3.6 meter, typical width. The possible reason of this being 3.6 is the availability of the wooden log at that time. So when the houses were built in 15th and 16th century, wood was the obvious choice of construction, using stone and lime. So the maximum length of the wood that was available was 3.6 meter, and hence all the houses that you see are roughly near 3.3, 3.6, 3.9 and maximum to 4.2 meter, depending on the what kind of wood size that you get, resulting into a kind of very different environment where the women sit on the otlas, on the plinth of the houses, and that becomes their social norm, that you sit on your otlas, you discuss, you chat. That becomes the kind of social cultural behavior of people. This is a typical morning in the walled city of Ahmedabad, where a man is sitting on the otla reading newspaper, the women is busy in the domestic chores, the kids are going to the school, coming back from the school, etc. And that's how an everyday life happens there. Looking at the other layers of the city, where you look at this is the public realm drawing, the grey and the white, where all the white is accessible by a common man, whereas all the grey are primarily privately owned. If you try to look at the land use or the building use drawing, you look at all the streets are primarily as a market. They are bazaar streets of Ahmedabad, whereas all the yellow are the private residences, injected with few red, which are the institutional buildings here and there. If you look at the street network diagram, it is not a grid iron pattern. They are very organic, responding to the topography. The walled city of Ahmedabad is basically designed using the topography, looking at the contour survey. In absence of AutoCAD and GIS mapping, they were very clear of how the water would move, where are the ridges, where are the valleys, and the street network was a result of how the topography functions. Looking at the second area, where it is the second part of the evolution, built in 1980s and 1990s. This is Malik Saban area, where the density is 400 people per hectare, where suddenly post-independence, during pre-independence area, where the whole idea of shift happened. So instead of having a courtyard within a house, the British government changed the whole typology of house in a court. So suddenly you see a house in a plot. That completely shifted the typology, because now you don't have a courtyard inside the house. You have a plot and you built a house inside. That is where the whole typology changed, and hence the street pattern and everything changed. Post-independence, we saw a huge industrialization, and we saw a lot of textile mills opening up during British rule and post-British rule also, where we saw a lot of chawl typology coming in, which chawl is a typical type in the old city of Ahmedabad, outside the old city of Ahmedabad, which were corridor-based unit. These are typical chawls. This is in Mumbai and this is in Ahmedabad, where all the textile workers used to live. So there is a central corridor or single-sided corridor, where the houses open up to the corridor. Post-independence, this is Sola Housing, which is Gujarat Housing Board. These are government-based social housing projects, which are very low-rise, medium-density housing, which occupy 410 people per hectare. The whole idea of walk-up apartment, elevators are not yet invented or not are widely used in Ahmedabad. This is around 1960, where the whole idea of walk-up apartment was very famous, and that is the typology that government used to build up the social housing. And lastly, when you see the newest development in the western part of Ahmedabad is the high-rise apartment with luxurious apartments coming in. The density still remains 400 people per hectare, even though they use and consume more FSI. And that is the kind of typology which has resulted with the new construction technology, high-speed elevators, a large span of concrete frame structure, where the masonry is just an infill. The kind of common plot is there. Your social life has changed from discussing in the chalk in the pole houses to the idea of club houses, home theater, swimming pool in the western part of Ahmedabad. So this is where if you look at the typological studies, this is where the house form has changed from vernacular to the latest houses in the western Ahmedabad. And this is where I believe that the house is a DNA of a city. So if you can understand a unit, which is the typical house. The houses multiply to become a cluster, cluster multiplies to become neighborhoods, neighborhood multiply to become localities, and many such localities come together to form a city. So this is a direct relationship of hierarchy of how does unit becomes a cluster and cluster eventually becomes a city. To put this into a matrix, I call this as a matrix where horizontal is all the squares that we discussed from the walled city of Ahmedabad to the Asarwa Mills to the Wadaj houses and lastly to the Prahlad Nagar and the kind of townships that are coming in. So this horizontal line are the diagrams which are based on evolution, and the vertical rows are the different layers that I prepared. So if you try to understand, you can prepare a large matrix looking at other cities across the globe. For example, I started looking at Jaipur, I started looking at Vidyadhar designed by Doshi sir, I started looking at Chandigarh designed by Corbusier, I started looking at Gandhinagar, which is the capital of Gujarat, and also looking at theoretical cities of Radiant City by Corbusier, and even Seaside, Florida, which is based on the Ebenezer Howard's idea of Garden City movement, Letchworth. So the horizontal rows are the fabric, are the samples of fabric which are 500 by 500 meter of the different cities across the globe, and the vertical columns are primarily the different layers. So if you try to understand, if I were to zoom in one of this, you look at how the street network has evolved in last 600 years, how the build form has changed in last 600 years in the city of Ahmedabad, where you see the walled city of Ahmedabad, it is very dense and organic, and you look at the western part of Ahmedabad, you see large footprints of building. Coming to the public realm area, where you see how much gray it is and how much white it is, where in the newer development western part of Ahmedabad, only the streets are public, rest the whole city is being privatized. If you look at the street network, how it is organic, the chances of social interaction are much more, whereas the cities are becoming very simple, very gridiron pattern, which is a resultant of the kind of transportation system that we use. It is very important to understand that where is the area wasting in, if you look at the built versus open diagram, that if you look at this, how much is white and black? 80% is built, only 20% is open. Whereas if you shift from this, you look at only 20% is built and 80 is open. What looks white in the built versus open diagram is actually not accessible to a common man. So on Google Earth, we feel that we have created large open spaces, but those open spaces are not accessible to a common man. These are primarily privately owned private gardens. To understand this, let us, let us understand how this typology of build form and open spaces work. Just to wake you up, if all of you are sleeping, this is a small game, which we should play. I would appreciate if you are able to raise your hands using the Microsoft Teams system. Are you able to identify which apple does not fit in the slide? Of course, the red one. We know that the red apple doesn't fit with the green apple, although they all are apples, but it is the color which says that it doesn't fit. If you were to identify which of the robot does not fit here, you say all of them are robot, they look much similar. But if I were to help you, this one in the first row and the second column, this is something which doesn't fit because it is the organization of the nut and bolt which is different, and hence this one is odd one out. If you were to play a similar game and say that, can you identify in the top row which one doesn't fit? You say that the octopus doesn't fit here. If I ask you which one doesn't fit here, you say the board game doesn't fit here. If I ask you in the third row which one doesn't fit, you will say the bowl doesn't fit. Even though all of them are meant to help you during dining, the three ones are more spoons and fork, while the bowl is more to serve, and hence it doesn't fit. In the fourth one, probably the horse doesn't fit because the three of them are more or less EV tree aviary birds and aeroplane, whereas the horse is terrestrial animal and hence it doesn't fit. And lastly, if you were to say milk is something given by the by by uh, by the animal, rest all are, where you're saying burger is a prepared food and apple and bananas are natural food. So somebody would say the burger doesn't fit here because it is man-made, versus apple, milk and banana are natural elements. Similarly, if you were to identify which one is odd one out here, so all of them are scissor. They are typologically same, but it is the purpose which is different. This is more to do with the planting and gardening, versus these four are more to use at domestic residential level. And similarly, you are absolutely clear of all of this being very simple organizational principles, but yet there is something which doesn't fit, and hence you are able to identify that this is something which does not fit in this typology. This is a very important exercise to understand typology. And if you, being an architect, now if I ask you that look at these houses in Amsterdam, and are you able to fill in the blank? Which one do we all think that fits in here? And somebody would say that, oh, I think the sloping roof is missing and hence I will put this yellow sloping roof there. Somebody would say, no, I don't think it's the sloping roof. It is the color which is missing. So I would put any house which has a cyan color in it. So there are various ways of filling the blanks, and this is where the typology comes into picture. If we were to understand the word typology, morphology and typomorphology, let us begin with a very revolutionary article by Raphael Monio. The article is called On Typology and it was published in 1960 in a magazine called Oppositions. Raphael Monio is an architect. All of you must be knowing him, very famous architect of Spain. He published an article where he explained the meaning of type, and he explained how the evolution of the meaning of type has happened. To begin with, we can say that while any architectural work can be characterized by its uniqueness, but it always belongs to a repeated object which we categorize. Such grouping is called type. Now, there are various ways of how you can group. The way we played the game in the earlier session, in the earlier slides, we say that, okay, you can create a category. You can categorize them based on the elements which constitute them. So anything which has a blade and a handle, you call it scissor. So scissor becomes a type. You can categorize them based on the period that they belong to. You can categorize them. This is an earlier method of cutting. This is a newer method of cutting. You can categorize them based on use. This is a domestic scissor. This is an industrial scissor, and this is a gardening scissor. So there are different ways of categorizing them. Post that, Durand, which was Quatramaire came up with this idea of type as organization. He says type is nothing but organization. He said for him the concept of type enabled architecture to reconstruct its link with the past. It is the way you organize these elements connecting to the history. Quatramaire says that this is a very different way of looking at type, where the French architect Durand says that the type is defined by the composition of columns, foundation and vault. He says the way you organize your columns, the way you organize your domes, it creates a very different type. Where the modernist came in and Corbusier said that type has nothing to do with history. It is a very new method. It's a very new meaning of looking at typology. The industrialization created the word prototype. It said something which can be multiplied is a prototype, and that is where type becomes something which is which can be multi-manufactured. So the whole idea of industrialization defined the way we look at type. And looking at Saverio Mortari's idea of school of thought of what is morphology, it says when you overlap the meaning of time on anything, you can study morphology. So time is an element. When you superimpose the layer of time on the study, it becomes the study of morphology. So against the failure of modern movement, a new theory emerged to see architecture or the city not as a single act, mass produce, but it is process. So the whole idea of understanding the city from its process in time is the meaning of morphology. To summarize, types are continuously transformed and new types are introduced. The various reasons of why these types come up are socio-economic transformation, new ways of organizing, context, technology, or styles and movements. To understand how the type has evolved, we look at the basic DNA of the city, which is a house. So we look at house. How did bungalows come in? So the whole idea of bungalows, where the word bungalow comes from Bangla. So Britishers brought in this whole typology in West Bengal, where the East India Company was there. The bungalow is a response to the hot and humid climate of Kolkata. So they came up with this whole idea of a veranda all across their house. Moving forward, the Ford car, the model XT, where the whole idea of American suburbs, where they started looking at house as a prototype, as a car. So Henry Ford, when invented the Ford Model X2, at the same time the American suburb, the way Jane Jacobs writes in her book, that how did suburbia emerge in American planning theory, is where you look at houses to be manufactured, you look them as a prototype, you make a house and you repeat them. You repeat to an extent that you need not to stay in the center of the city. So you every day drive down to the central cities and you live in suburbia, because car is affordable. Car was very cheap at that time. That shifted to the whole idea of townhouses and apartments, where the whole idea of densification, vertical shafts came into picture. This is first ever apartment typology that came in New York. It is called the dumbbell house because of its shape of a dumbbell, which we use in gym. So it's a typical apartment typology that brought in with a central courtyard and a corridor, which led to the 4 units accessible from the central service shaft. Post that, we saw semi-detached houses, which are very flexible, urban typology, which have flexibility of orientation. It supports family units, and that is the kind of semi-detached houses that we see, which has a common wall, which is sharing wall, and you have a garage and you have houses on next to it. Along with this, we also see row houses, which we call attached typology. They are primarily, we call them row houses or tower houses or terrace houses. They are able to achieve very high density. They share 2 common walls. So they have only front wall and back wall as an area to access ventilation. And most of the row houses have a central courtyard to take ventilation in the central areas. And lastly, we have this multi-dwelling, where the whole idea of elevators are invented. The structural systems are newer. You can go taller. You can save a lot of ground for children to play, for lawn areas and other. And that is where the typology shifted to high-rise apartment. So if you look at the physical form, you can say that, okay, there are 4 types of housing. We can look at row houses, semi-detached and apartments. You can classify them into based on their physical height. You can call them low rise, mid rise, high rise, or towers. You can classify them based on their spatial thing. All 3 of them are row houses, but one has a central courtyard. It is thinner. Second still has a central courtyard with front yard and backyard, and the third one doesn't have a central courtyard, but it is still a row house with margins on all the 3 sides. Or you can classify them based on their style. You can say that this is a colonial bungalow with the kind of style that it is, and this is a modern bungalow somewhere in Delhi. And you say it is the style which is different. Both of them fall into the category of bungalow, but the bungalow in Goa is very different than bungalow in Delhi. To take this forward, we look at one more example of the city of Jaipur. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the city of Jaipur. The city of Jaipur was designed by Vidyadhar. He was then called the architect, urban designer, urban planner, whomsoever you may call him. And it is based on the 9-square mandala of Indian mythology. Hindu Vastu Purush mandala is as we call it. So it is based on this 9-square principle, where the geometry was very sacred, but Vidyadhar was a very sensitive architect, urban designer, urban planner, whatever you call. He was very sensitive to the ecology. So he shifted the top southwest square to the northwest square to the southwest, and uh, uh, because he respected the ecology. He said that the ecology is more important than the sacred geometry. And this is how the city of Jaipur, the old city of Jaipur, is this. It is primarily a 9 square grid iron plan, where the each square is 800 meter by 800 meter, where the central 2 squares are where the palace and the museums are there, and the remaining 7 squares are more residential, commercial, and institutional in nature. If you were to understand the city of Jaipur from morphological perspective, the 9 squares are divided by streets, and each junction of the street is called Chopad. Chopad is the junction where the streets meet, and each street has a very different character of it being a market, the bazaar street. If you were to take 1 square, this is 1 square of Jaipur, this is 800 by 800 meter, and this is the kind of building use that you see. If you were to delayer it, the black is the kind of the street network that it follows. So this is 800 by 800 meter, where you see that there are streets which run horizontal and vertical. But not all the streets are grid iron. Somewhere you see the streets which are not grid iron, they are organic in nature. And when you superimpose the drawing on the contour map, topography map of that square, you see that the streets are responding to the topography. They follow the contour, they follow the way water moves in the precinct. If you look at the blue, which is the commercial, it is very obvious that the main street has a commercial bazaar, but the commercial bazaar does not stop on the periphery. It also brings in some of the grocery shop, daily shops, that daily milk shop, grocery shop, vegetable shops, hair cutting salons, anything and everything that an everyday family would require, the shops come in. This is the red, which is the institutional layer. In absence of a university and school at that time, universities were the institutional buildings are primarily, you may call them madrasa, you may call them Jain temple, you may call them akhadas, you may call them any religious institute or social institute is what the red means. So they are equally spread in this 800 by 800 meter square. They are not consolidated or concentrated in one part, the way the modern planning works. And this is of course the yellow, which is the residential part, which is equally spread. And green is not just the public green, there are also private greens inside the pole houses and the havelis of Jaipur. So you can see how the green is equally scattered, and you can see the hierarchy of green. The smallest one being the courtyard within the private house, and the largest one being the foreground of any mosque or the temple. Green here does not mean a physical green. Green here means an open space. And this is how the overall form of this is located. Looking at it from a transportation perspective, the 800 meter by 800 meter square is basically a 5-minute walking distance. So if you are in the center of the sector, if you are in the center of the square, it will only take you 5 minutes to reach to any of the primarily 4 streets on the periphery of this. All the institute, all the madrasa, all the temples, all the akhadas are within the 5-minute walking distance. So the whole idea of walk to school is not a dream. So the new urbanism, the principles of new urbanism talks about walk to school and walk to work, whereas Jaipur has already done that 400 years ago. They have demonstrated how new urbanism can be very well implemented in the cities of India. Zooming in, we are saying that this 800 meter by 800 meter is actually made up of roughly 4 quadrants of 400 meter by 400 meter, which we call them urban block. This is an example of Modi Khana Chowkri in Jaipur, where you can see that how 400 meter by 400 meter is further divided into 200 meter by 200 meter roughly. These are not purely mathematical, but they are roughly 200 meter by 200 meter, which they call mohalla. So mohalla is a neighborhood scale that you talk about. So it is a sense of scale which is social and physiological in your nature. So whenever a kid has a fight, he says, "Come to my mohalla, I'll show you what I can do." So it's a saying that every dog is a tiger in its mohalla. So you are very familiar. It's a sense of belonging. You have a sense of ownership within this mohalla, and you are familiar with this whole area. Everybody knows you. Everybody knows your parents, so you feel safe. Zooming it in, each mohalla is made up of 100 meter by 100 meter, which we call it cluster. So each cluster of 100 meter by 100 meter, where 25 houses, 27 houses come together, and they form a smaller mohalla. This is a very intimate scale. They are primarily dead ends, and even a stranger walks into this area, any elderly person can ask, kiska kaam hai, why are you here, whom are you wanting to meet. So these are very dead end spaces where the family feels, where they do their daily activities, they celebrate birthdays, they celebrate, they do funerals, etc. So that is the larger scale. And from the gridiron street of Jaipur old city to the organic street, these are responding to the context. They're responding to the topography, where they are gridded and organic at the same time, and that is the kind of typology that emerges. So you have a very small house of an economically weaker person. At the same time, you have a large haveli of a very rich person, all integrated inside the sector. It is not HIG housing on this side and LIG housing on this side. It's a very social, sustainable building environment where rich and poor, weak and strong, everybody lives together to create a very humane and sustainable living environment. And that is where I make this diagram, where it's a cyclic proportion, where everything has a hierarchy from smaller houses to larger havelis, from smaller courtyards to larger central courtyards of mosque and madrasas to etc. So I believe that Indian urbanism morphologically is very interesting, and there is always a scale. There is always a cyclic scale associated with time on our cities, and that is where I end my presentation today. I will stop sharing the screen. Uh, yes. Yeah. Yes, I am done. So
Yeah,
thank you
sir,
very much for this opportunity. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to discuss your thoughts and ideas.
Thank you, sir, for giving us such an insightful session. Now I request participants to raise your hand option to ask you questions.
Any question?
You can use the raise your hand option which is available bottom to the screen.
No questions? Either it was very simple or it was very boring.
So good afternoon, Professor Narendra Mangwani. It was a
Good
very
afternoon.
interesting presentation. Like
Thank
we could
you.
see the transition of Ahmedabad over the last 60, 70 years, and
Yes.
also the importance of house in architecture. Like you have given different typologies of house. We could see so many typologies, and you quoted examples all over India as well as abroad. So can you explain the importance of house? Because I'm handling anthropology and architecture for MArch students. We
Yeah.
could see lots of anthropologists giving different meanings right from a single unit.
Okay.
So can you throw some light on anthropology or the importance of house in architecture
Sure.
to understand the people?
Sure. I think that's a very important field where everybody is trying to find out the relationship between architecture, house, and city and life. So these are the four words which are always jumbled up, and you always fall into this question: is architecture a response to the way we live, or do buildings shape our life or our buildings are shaped by architecture? So we always fall prey to this question, and there is no answer to this. Whereas we can say that all our houses are responses to the way we live. So when you look at any vernacular house form, anthropologically, our life revolves around the house form. You know, the way you live, the house is your reflection. But in this current idea of mass housing, where the whole idea of personalization is removed, and where Corbusier says house is a machine we live in, and it has been literally translated that, you know, uh, you adjust your lifestyle based on the house you get. So even when you live in an apartment, if you love gardening, if you love planting, but the width of the balcony does not allows you to do that, you know, and each apartment gives you a typical puja size, whether you are a religious person, you are an atheist, but you still get that space called puja room, you know. So house, it is very important to understand the relationship between life, house, and architecture, and hence cities. And I believe that this is a very important question, where, as you said, lot of anthropologists, even if you look at the very famous book by Amos Rappaport about house form and culture, that how does house is responding to this. I will now to give two examples, where I would say that if you look at any vernacular house form across India, we did not have nomenclature. There was no names given for the rooms. There were only four names. One was toilet, one was kitchen, one was veranda, and one was courtyard. There was no other norm. You will name all the rooms as room. You do whatever you want. If you want to eat, it is a dining room. If you want to sleep, it's a sleeping room. So all our ancestors, my grandfather, my grandparents used to sleep in the living room. You know, there was no separate bedroom for them, and we have we have grown up seeing that.
Yes.
And in the today's typology of house, each activity has a room. So you have an informal room, you have a formal room, you have an informal dining, you have a formal dining. So the multi-purposeness has gone away. You know, so in our old houses, when you have a function at your house, you have a puja. Just remove the furniture and it becomes a puja space. You know, sofa बाहर रख दिया तो वो पूजा के लिए जगह बन जाता है. पर अभी that is not possible in today's context, because each room has a name. So the moment you give a nomenclature, the multi-purposeness is gone. You know, you take away that space. So I think that is very important aspect to understand. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Narendra. It was very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Okay. Take care.
Any other questions from participants side?
I think they must be hungry for lunch.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that?
Yeah, on behalf of Marg Institute of Design and Architecture, Swarnabhumi, I once again thank you for giving such an insightful session in this conference.
Narayan Zaid has raised the hand.
Yeah. Zaid, you can unmute yourself and you can proceed for the question.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Thank you for your very insightful presentation, sir. I just wanted to ask about that metrics you have made, because we are doing an urban morphology as a subject where we have taken an old city of Chennai. And we have been doing all those morphological and how the transformation and human settlements has been happening. So those metrics as a base, how did you arrive at that? Like you have the open space relationship, public realm, and then land use pattern, and there were no hierarchy on the bylaws, and then you had hierarchy on roads and those things. So how did you have that as a base, and then because it will be very useful for us to use in our morphological analysis also, sir.
Okay. This is this system I designed during my postgraduate thesis at SET in urban design, where if you look at the vertical, if you look at the column, as you rightly said, I began with, if you want to understand Chennai, So
Yes.
you divide Chennai into different phases of development. So from pre-independence to the current 2020. So you divide Chennai into logical, rational evolution periods, and try to identify 1 kilometer or 500 by 500 meter squares within that.
Okay. Okay, sir.
If you start delayering each and every square, what is that square made up of? The square will have definitely built versus open diagram. It will have street network. It will have open space, which we call public realm drawing. It will have building use. It will have land use. It will
Yes.
have transportation system. It will have building bylaws. It will have zoning. It will have many other density, job opportunities, etc., etc. So you prepare this list of drawings that you want to make. So there will be around 10 to 12 drawings depending on the kind of analysis that you want to get into.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
when you have this list ready, make the same drawings for all the squares. If you have identified 10 squares, make all the 10 drawings for 10 squares. So you have 100.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
you
sir.
have 10 squares in horizontal and you have 10 squares in vertical. Now the real exercise begin where you need to analyze. You will get two kinds of analysis. One is horizontal analysis and second is vertical
Vertical.
analysis.
Vertical.
So when you start horizontal analysis, print all the 10 squares of street, pin them up on your softboard or projector, whatever medium are you working in. Look at each and everything and try to find out the question, why is it the way it is? Why is the street network very different there and why is the street network very different here? When you try to find out the answer, you will be looking at transportation system
Yes.
and
Yes.
what is that particular network system responding to? What is the difference that it is making? So when it is the old city of Chennai, when you walk inside the streets of old city of Chennai, what is the kind of urban form, urban experience that you get? What
Yes.
is the social interaction that you get? Versus what are the, if you know GIS, it will tell you what are the nodes and junctions.
Yes. Yes, sir.
From a sociological perspective, there is a hypothesis which believes that more the physical interaction, there are chances of more social interaction. Because when you walk in the walled city of Chennai, or the old city of Chennai, the chances of interacting with a stranger and a known person is more.
Definitely.
Versus when you are in a new city of Chennai, the chances are very less because you are in your car and he and she is in their car. So you don't
Definitely.
actually meet. Okay.
Yes.
That also talks about the architecture of speed. So when you walk inside the old city of Chennai, you see carving, you see minute detail, you see smaller font sizes of signage, marketing, etc., etc.
Yes.
But because your speed is 3 km per hour, you are walking. You are able to appreciate minute details. You are able to appreciate color. You are able to appreciate that. But when you are driving at 60 km per hour in the new city of Chennai, the font sizes increases. So if
Yes.
they want
Yes.
to if they want to tell you Reliance, the size of R has to be 5 feet and 1.5 meter and 2 meter. Then
Definitely.
only at the speed of 60 you are able to register the board of Reliance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is the urban form. The urban form has changed. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Similarly, you draw inferences on each row and each column. You will surprise to see that the kind of information that you get will be amazing. So
Yes,
you
sir.
can use this method of matrix and print physical copies. When you look at with your eyes, they allow you to cross learn.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, we have a question from Prakash. So
Sir,
you can unmute, you can ask.
good morning, sir. Thank you for your really inspiring presentation for us. Actually, it has opened up our this one actually, because the way you have given the comparison between the Ahmedabad and the Jodhpur, so both which is having a gridiron pattern and which is having a different scenario itself, like which is having a bigger scale, larger scale, and the Jodhpur is also having the gridiron pattern, which is having a very a walkable city.
Yes.
The comparison between the both cities are really what you have expressed, and the way you have given the sketches, the presentations. It was really eye opener for us.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And so I would like to ask you certain this one actually, sir. Like,
Yes.
so when the commercialized things actually, and so whatever the residential things which is happening in Ahmedabad, and whatever you compared with the Jodhpur, how it is like the connectivity between the thing, and how it is varies. I mean to say the sector wise that is there in Ahmedabad. If you say that is a commercial wise, and if we take the same gridiron pattern in our Jodhpur city, which is having residential part and more, uh, how we can connect it such a way that um, uh, those things, how we can connect it in our morphological way and in urban scale.
Okay. I think that's a very important question. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I would like to say that, see, when you look at any vernacular, any old city, or any existing economically powerful city, whether it is Jaipur, Jodhpur, Chennai, or Ahmedabad, you see that all our previous cities had this good mix of residences, institution, commercial, green, everything happening. With the new planning reforms, with the new planning strategies inspired from the Western idea of planning, our cities have unfortunately started dividing these land uses and building uses. So now we have townships which are purely residences. We have central business districts which are purely business. We have universities, Gujarat University, Anna University, which have dedicated university campus. We have large parks and maidans, which we call them green zones, and you go and play there. We have started segregating these colors. I call them colors because in planning they are primarily red, blue, yellow, and industries and etc. This new theory has its own pros and cons, right? It has its own merits of it being separate, so you can control pollution, you can manage land effectively, etc., etc. I call it a solved Rubik's cube. The moment you solve a Rubik's cube, you are able to divide yellow, blue, and orange and green and etc. But I call Indian urbanism as unsolved Rubik's cube, and also they are volumetric. So there is a famous Hindi word called Hindi proverb called niche dukan upar makan, which means ground floor is a shop and first floor and second floor is a house. If you try to understand the whole idea of new urbanism principles, they talk about walk to work and walk to school and etc., etc. Out of 18 parameters of new urbanism, I believe 12 are already there in Jaipur. So it is very interesting to understand that what do we get when we mix the land uses and building use? Why can we not think of volumetric mixing them? Why should we have dedicated institutional areas and dedicated, if a kid wants to play cricket, I also live in the western fringes of Ahmedabad. Believe me, if I want to buy a Parle-G biscuit or a milk, I have to get my car, drive 2 kilometers away, buy milk and come back. Is this the kind of lifestyle that we Indians want to live? Is this our way of living? No, we have been brought up in an environment where you just walk 50, 100 meters and you get grocery shops. You don't have to take a car to buy vegetables. So this whole idea of mall society, the mall culture, is actually inspired from this Western philosophy of planning and suburbs, right? Where it's a very car dominated society. Now, when we say walk to work, walking has actually become instead of becoming our daily routine, walking has become an activity. I go to walk in the morning because you don't generally walk during the day. And hence, walking has become a deliberate activity. Oh, my doctor has said you need to walk. As a humans, we are meant to walk, right? There is no question on that. But our planning, our urban design, our urban planning does not allows us to do that. we are again dependent on our two-wheelers and four-wheelers for our everyday activity. Yeah. So I think this Rubik's Cube is a very good example. Whenever you design, you question yourself, are you promoting a solved Rubik's Cube philosophy, or do you believe in an unsolved Rubik's Cube? I personally believe in unsolved Rubik's Cube. I want a good mix. I want a good mix of residence, commerce, entertainment, green areas. You don't want to drive a car to play cricket. I don't want my son to drive to the school. I want him to walk to school. But I don't know whether it would be possible or not. So that is my philosophy. You may disagree to it, and you may invent your own Rubik's Cube. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
No, I really agree with your points, sir. Actually, that is very, very inspiring because we like to walk to school and our own premises that is nearer to us, actually. Thank you for your valuable
Thank
answers.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Any other questions from participants here?
All right then. So if there are no questions, we can.
Yes. Now I thank Architect Narendra Mangwani for being such patient enough to answer all the questions.
Thank you.
It's time for lunch now, so we'll have a lunch break till 1:30. So we'll start our afternoon session exactly at 1:30 p.m. I request all the participants to join back before 5 minutes.
Narayan, we have virtual photograph photo session.
Yeah. So now I request all the participants to switch on your camera. I request everyone to switch on your camera. Yes, thank you everyone. So we'll be starting our afternoon session exactly by 1:30 p.m.
Okay.
Please join before 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot.